While the mind's still revolving around what the heck went down in the undisputed showdown between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk,
Good job by the...
something extremely bizarre is happening in the boxing. Frank Martin allegedly claimed that Gervonta Davis has been working on the 12 pounds rehydration clause for their lightweight title fight on June 15th, which is literally making no sense to me. Because Martin claimed he didn't know about it at all, yet their contract had already been signed. Notably, on similar lines as the IBF, the WBA has decided to put a 12-pound rehydration limit on the championship fights. It's peculiar that WBA randomly just implemented this new rule only for Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin fight after their contract. On top of it, did Gervonta already know about it? That seems unfair. Let's see how Gervonta Davis addresses these allegations. Also, by any chance, Frank Martin can refuse this WBA rehydration clause? We'll see in a bit. WBA President Gilberto Mendoza intended to implement the rehydration limit in a conversation with DAZN's Chris Mannix, who posted the initial details on X. That quoted, WBA President Gilberto Mendoza confirms that there will be a WBA-mandated rehydration clause in the Tank Davis-Frank Martin fight. In a text message to @Sino, Mendoza says there will be a 12-pound rehydration limit that was based on recent events. Mendoza did not respond when asked if this was WBA policy for all sanctioned fights. Let me quickly fill you in about the 12-pound rehydration clause.
For you, was there someone on your team? What's the thought behind it?
He's a bigger fighter. He's a bigger fighter and he's only growing. Why would I fight somebody that's already... You see how...
It means there will be a second weigh in 12 hours before the fight where the fighter is only allowed to rehydrate 12 pounds over the weight limit. For example, if a fighter weighs in at 160 pounds, a 12-pound rehydration clause would prevent them from weighing more than 172 pounds on the day of the fight. In combat sports, the most difficult aspect of fighting is often not the fight itself, but rather the process of making weight before fight night. With the weight-cutting process comes rehydration, which can be confusing to some who have never gone through the grueling procedure themselves. That's why Frank Martin was particularly concerned about the sudden change in the rules, especially since Gervonta Davis had experience with the rehydration clause, whereas Frank Martin did not. Remember the bout between Davis and Garcia in April 2023, the fighters agreed to a catchweight limit of 136 pounds. However, Davis's team proposed a rehydration clause, allowing for only 10 pounds to be added back on after the official weigh-ins, thus limiting both men to weighing only 146 pounds on fight night. However, Davis versus Garcia isn't the only big boxing fight to have used the rehydration clause. Several other fights also featured this. Like Canelo versus Sergey Kovalev also had the rehydration clause in their contracts. The bout took place in 2019 and the stipulations stated that none of the fighters could weigh more than 185 pounds. The two fighters were to submit a weight check in the morning before their fight. If any fighter fails to adhere to the rules, they face significant financial consequences. For instance, Daniel Jacobs couldn't meet the 170-pound limit and had to forfeit $1 million to Canelo Alvarez. So by remembering Davis versus Garcia this time also, Chris Mannix's post made Gervonta Davis go under scrutiny by the fans, facing continuous backlash with accusations suggesting that the idea of implementing the clause is his own, not the WBA's. Some fans have already criticized Tank for taking cover behind a rehydration clause to gain an advantage over his opponents. Alright, let me explain the kind of advantage fighters can gain from rehydration. It's clear that Frank Martin is larger than Davis. If their fight adheres to rehydration protocols, Martin will need to drain some weight to meet the specific weight limit. Consequently, Martin's energy will decrease, giving Davis an advantage. However, Davis clearly denied these accusations. The 29-year-old Baltimore native clarified that he wasn't aware of the new clause until it became the talk of the internet. However, he also questioned how both fighters coming into the fight at the same weight was a problem. Well, I mentioned earlier, why would this be a problem? But anyway, Davis posted, "I didn't know about this until yesterday on Twitter. But why is everybody mad? We have to weigh in the same weight and come into the fight at the same weight? What the is the problem?" But he didn't stop there. Out of frustration, he questioned fans. "Y'all telling me I have enough power to tell the WBA what to do?" Well, I don't know about you, Davis, but Frank Martin had. Just one day after Chris Mannix's post about rehydration, the WBA overturned its decision and dropped the clause. The reason? Frank Martin. They needed to inform challenger Frank Martin of their intention to incorporate the clause into his bout with Davis, but they failed to do so as the fight contract was already signed. Dan Rafael turned to his X handle and clarified that Davis versus Martin would not feature the WBA's newly introduced clause. He quoted, "Been asked this a lot past couple of days. Here's the answer. No, there is no rehydration clause for Davis Martin. WBA is planning to follow IBF by requiring fight morning weight check. But this fight was already done and it won't be part of it. Possible for future WBA title bouts." Rafael, in defense of Mannix, who had come under scrutiny for his initial posting, but committee responsible had not yet notified Martin. So no second-day weigh-in, nothing nefarious. So all boxing fans, relax. Everything will proceed as usual. WBA lightweight title holder Gervonta Davis will fight Frank Martin without any rehydration clause, just like any other boxing match. Both players got back to their training even harder than before. However, if the WBA did consider this new rehydration rule, it's highly likely that they will implement it soon. Featherweight champion Raymond Ford, who meets Nick Ball on June 1st, said hell no when asked if he had a rehydration clause and vowed to enter the ring at 160 pounds. While most boxers oppose this rule, there are some who favor it. Leonard Ellerbe believes it would put the weight bullies in check. He posted, "Glad to see these weight bullies slowly but surely being put in check." But hey, if we consider Leonard Ellerbe's perspective, then this 12-pound rehydration clause is indeed a revolutionary measure that prevents fighters from bulking up excessively and gaining an unfair advantage in the fight. For instance, fighters like Devin Haney and David Benavidez have been criticized in the past for dramatically bulking 15 to 20 pounds heavier just before the fight and using their size advantage against opponents. So yeah, it remains to be seen when the WBA will enforce this clause. Then, with the IBF and WBA enforcing rehydration rules, the only organizations yet to implement the rule are the WBC and WBO. Once they decide to implement the same rule, then you won't see fighters coming in at least 15 pounds heavier than the limit. With a 12-pound limit for rehydration, that would cause fighters to move up in weight classes. There's no way they would subject themselves to fees for violations of missing that weight. This is a great rule for boxing and a possible game changer. Now, what do you think? Do you also believe WBA's new rehydration clause would level the playing field for fighters? Let me know in the comments below.